you are. I'm Jeremy Walsh, owner and creative director of Soulbound Studios with some of my staff members. I've got Jason Deathwelter and Vi Alexander. Vi Alexander now on my right. The topic of today's Q&A is Pue Alpha Experiences. Something that we originally touched on for the first time almost a year ago now, is in June of 2016 when we first mentioned that we'd be doing a couple different Pue Alpha Experiences. Shall we get started?
Yeah.
Let's do it. We had posted a couple months back a timeline kind of showing our general development plan and the order in which we want to do things in, and that hasn't changed. So we are continuing right now towards the development of our Pre-Alpha Experiences, which is relevant to the topic. Prologue, Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD are all kind of simultaneously in development right now. Prologue is the thing that's under most proactive development by the larger part of our team, because a subset of the Prologue is what's going to be shown at PAX. And so, being that that's our kind of visual experience, that's a lot more fun than gray boxes moving around in the back end of a network.
This is why you see in the updates a lot of screenshots of that region in Titan Step.
So that's happening. Elyria MUD is undergoing a lot of back-end stuff right now. There's a lot of development of early data structures and planning. And then, of course, Kingdoms of Elyria is more than just the game itself. It's also about the Dance of Dynasties, and a big part of that is settlement selection. But before we can get settlement selection, settlement and domain selection to people, we need to have the geography of the world. And so there's development undergoing right now on our world generation and making sure we have the initial continents laid out so that there will be settlements from which to select from. So all that's happening right now. The next goal, next objective, next major milestone you'll see is settlement selection. We don't have a firm date for that yet, but our estimate hasn't changed. We're still thinking that it's probably going to be sometime late spring or something like that. And then in terms of the pre-alpha experiences, it depends on how our resources shift between them, which one's going to drop first and when exactly they'll land. So we don't know yet, but as soon as we have a confident date for you guys, we will let you know. But we are excited about them, and we think you guys are going to enjoy it.
We want to give you sort of the ability to be in the family, be able to play with your friends, so providing those opportunities for you. So it might not necessarily be planning out your family ahead of time. You can make those social interactions before exposition starts. But we're going to give you the opportunities to get in the families you want with your friends by either unlocking in parent and children codes. And then also we're going to be making the families a little bit larger so you can have those slots available. So you might see two parents having 3 or 4 kids instead of just having a single kid. That way you actually have those opportunities to get into the same family.
It's also worth noting that in the pre-alpha experiences, you are playing your ancestors, not exactly your characters.
Mm-hmm.
That won't start until exposition or at launch or whenever you join when that part happens. So if you're not in exactly the same family during those experiences that you are later on when the game is live, then it's just a different experience. It's not necessarily like you're completely shut out from being able to be part of your friend's family.
Kingdoms of Elyria is about learning the roles that you can play in the game, so managing a kingdom, and so being able to upgrade the infrastructure. So maybe you're building a dirt road and then you upgrade it to a stone road or go on from there. So we want to give those opportunities for you to figure out how you want to manage your kingdom. Gaining NPC followers is probably not going to be something you would see in Kingdoms of Elyria or Elyria MUD. It's more about sort of interactions with other players, the Dance of Dynasties, and so the most I think we could maybe see is a pet or something like that. But getting a relationship between you and an NPC is something that we probably don't want to sort of put a lot of our development efforts on at that time.
The point of the pre-alpha experiences is to try to get the game into player hands as soon as possible so that we have the opportunity to learn and improve, iterate the game, fix things, test things out before the game is ready for launch. And so it's pre-alpha experiences. They are not done. The game's not done when these things start. So they're going to be initially a smaller subset of features, and we'll add more and more as we continue on, and then eventually it will all come together in the game.
And the short answer is that it won't. There is going to be a region in the world known as Titan Step. There is these settlements of New Haven and Silver Run. Somebody might have the opportunity to pick those during settlement and domain selection, or we might leave it as a neutral territory that can't be governed. But the idea is that the prologue is actually focused on just that single county, and so the majority of the world events that are occurring as part of the Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD pre-alpha experiences won't impact prologue.
I imagine that this question is being asked because somebody might want to choose one piece of land or one region over another because they really want to be like
Silversmith.
the silversmith of Elyria, and so if their region has none of that, it's going to be very difficult for them to
Right.
fulfill their role-playing goal of being the silversmith of Elyria.
That would be unfortunate.
Yeah.
So yes, you'll be able to get that information. So henceforth, Elyria MUD is actually a graphical MUD. It's a 2D top-down graphical MUD in the spirit of like
Think old NES adventure games,
Zelda.
Zelda.
Zelda and stuff like that.
Yeah. So the short of it is there will be some user interface to check your equipment and inventory and things like that. Not anything significant. Those are all disposable user interfaces because it's really designed to test the back-end mechanics, not the user interface. The user experience and user interface of the game will be different, but it will include simple user interfaces, and then there will be a character on screen, and you'll be able to see the NPCs that you're interacting with, and you'll be able to see the edges of bushes and buildings potentially and things like that. Nothing too extreme because again the focus is going to be on the mechanics. So it might be that when you encounter an NPC in the world that they all look exactly the same except for maybe a little bubble over their head that tells you like the name of the NPC or like what type of NPC. Like this is a baker, this is a butcher. Well, they look exactly the same, but it's clear that at least one of
One
them is
has the
different.
chef hat.
I
So-
don't know. That's
a lot. That's resource intensive. We have to make a
Oh.
chef's
Make
hat.
that
versus-
asset, which is
I can draw it in MS Paint.
You might have to. I think our content creators are pretty busy as it is.
right,
little bit.
we want them to be actually making the real 3D assets for character customization and everything. No.
Fair warning, you might get programmer art with these. I think the best way to answer that is that that's really up to the players. Technically speaking, until settlement domain selection happens, those relationships aren't actually formalized.
It's pretty much like most multiplayer games. If you go out there and you make your alliance and you form your guild before the game starts and you go out there, you're going to have the benefit of having your community with you, whether it's an alliance with another kingdom or whatever. It's just people are being very proactive right now trying to do those things.
Sparks of Life, absolutely not. The things that are occurring inside of Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD are things that happen to your ancestors, not you, and they do not directly affect the titles, benefits, and other things that people receive as part of their pledge packages. So, you know, the lifetimes that you live in Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD just generally don't have any cost against you guys. It's an opportunity for you to get involved and play the game as a way to help us test and make sure that the systems are secure and strong, and also to write that early history. So don't worry about having to buy additional Sparks of Life. It doesn't cost you anything. EP is an interesting one. This is something that we're talking about internally in the company right now, and I will just go ahead and let you guys know that we haven't decided yet, because the work that you guys are doing in Kingdoms of Elyria does help build infrastructure and things like roads and things like that towards the kind of development of your domains. And so whether or not those things require EP or anything like that is something that we're still debating on.
Right, EP stands for exposition points,
Right.
and the intention was that they would be used and consumed only during exposition, but there may be other reasons why we might fudge that.
Yeah.
We might change it.
Because ultimately exposition's about building the history of the world and helping to build up, you know, the settlements and things like that exist at launch. It's just that we might be doing that over a longer period of time. So instead of just doing that sort of thing during exposition, it might be doing it as part of Kingdoms of Elyria as well. At this point, we are not planning for them to be mobile accessible. The new format of Elyria MUD, making it kind of a 2D graphical MUD, as well as Kingdoms of Elyria, kind of requiring a larger user interface, makes it more conducive for desktop applications. That being said, we are probably going to build the user interfaces for those in Unity, not web-based at this point, and Unity does support mobile development, so it's something that we can consider, and I certainly appreciate the idea of being able to get at least mobile alerts and things like that for the things that are going on in the game. So it's something that we'll definitely be looking into. She would have to say yes or no, because that's totally within her realm of making sure that we stay on schedule.
Yeah,
So-
we'll cost it out and see what makes sense. It will be very difficult to create a legacy for your ancestors if
There are no ancestors.
there are no ancestors.
Yes.
So yes.
So settlement selection, domain selection, you'll want to know the names of those things. Primarily because if you create that domain, if you're saying I'm going to create the county of X, whatever that may be, then any mayors or barons who are looking for you are going to want to find you under the county that you've said your name will be. We are kind of writing the history as you play, and so if you have to create more characters in order to continue to play because you're getting killed in Elyria Mud or whatever, then according to history, they had a big family. Building management, or the ability to construct large structures and buildings, is something that requires the architecture tool, and the architecture blueprint system is something that is an Alpha 2 feature, not an Alpha 1 feature. So while you will be able to, in Kingdoms of Elyria, for example, be able to say, this is where I'm going to put a building for the purpose of my settlement development, it's not a situation where you can actually design the blueprint for that building. It'll be a stub, a template, and then upon actual gameplay, you'll be able to do more once you get into exposition. Through Elyria Mud, anybody who is a paid backer, even at the most basic level, the Elyria package, at some point when we open it up to everybody, will be able to get in and play, and your ability to go in and do those things will mean that whoever your liege lord is, whether or not it's a mayor account or whatever, it's only through your actions can they actually attain any kind of success. The two games are intimately connected with one another, Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria Mud, and while in KoE, the aristocracy and nobility will be doing things like mobilizing armies and military and changing the taxes and laws and things like that, it ultimately is Elyria Mud that those things are impacting. So, as I mentioned in our recent design journal, if you were to attempt to mobilize in Kingdoms of Elyria an army at a location, it pinpoints a flag and says, this is where I want our army to be. It has to be the actual players in Elyria Mud who then take that information and go there and do that thing. And so it's really the players who are the aristocracy and nobility directing the players who are not. If you can't get people into those games to do what you ask, and you don't have a sufficiently large following, which includes NPCs, then you will not have very much success. Likewise, we mentioned that previously, as well as in the design journal, that it's an opportunity for people to earn influence points and store credit for doing really cool things inside of Elyria Mud, which could be story related and things like that. And it's possible to gain enough influence and store credit from those to actually upgrade your packages and things like that. So we encourage everybody to play those, regardless of what your current level of title is. But just like we don't require people to use Sparks of Life during the Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria Mud, there's no connections between the souls of those two. While the family and legacy and history is persistent, the souls are not. So there's no way to do character development during that time. Primarily because we don't want to punish people who aren't engaging in those things. While there is motivation and benefit to participating in those things, and we do want to kind of help players get into a better position in terms of like technology and research in their families, dynasties, and things like that, we really don't want to view this as a head start for players. It's really about just setting up what the world is in terms of lore and history at launch. There are multiple servers in this game. We have 2 North America servers, an EU server, and an Australia server that we're planning. And the events that occur in the Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria Mud are designed to be historically accurate to the worlds that they're associated with. So there will be multiple instances of these games that are geographically specific. And so by participating in those games, you are getting your first opportunity to roam around in the world, learn the landscape a little bit, get a relative idea of where things are located, and start to build relationships with people who are also playing Chronicles of Elyria. So there are many reasons aside from just character development or having a title for why you might want to jump into Elyria Mud.
Yeah, the maps, the people that you share the server with, and the names of the families that are available, and the settlements, those names are all going to be per server. And so it's going to diverge immediately that it's not going to be the same game per server.
Much like the game, I mean, if you have multiple characters, each with their own spark of life and soul, playing on multiple servers, then there's no reason you couldn't do the same here. No. Unless you have more than one pledge package. Each pledge package represents a single account, and so while an account can have characters on more than one server, each pledge package is bound to a single character. So in order to have, for example, counties on multiple servers, you'd have to have multiple account packages.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it's for.
That's the whole point of that. Yeah. So if you're playing Kingdoms of Elyria and you have a falling out with your king, and you just can't stand that person, the question specifically was, can you just abandon that location and create your county elsewhere or something like that? Nope.
You already settled. You've made your name.
Yeah.
You've sworn your alliances and.
But the beauty of that then is that when Chronicles of Elyria actually begins and you come into exposition, you've already got an opponent in the game who just happens to be your liege lord, and you now have the inspiration and motivation to team up with others in order to overthrow them. So we absolutely hope that there's things like that happening in Kingdoms of Elyria.
Yeah. Personally, I wouldn't want to leave my kingdom if I burn some bridges with my king. My plan is to become king.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
No. Later.
At this point, establishing of holidays and things inside the pre-alpha experiences that the NPCs will recognize as holidays or other important dates is not something that exists.
Definitely not for alpha,
Okay.
and we could consider that request as something that would go into the live game.
Okay. Technology and research is a component of Kingdoms of Elyria,
Mm-hmm.
specifically for kings and individuals. So a king can say, I want to research this type of thing, which then gets passed down to Elyria MUD so that the individuals can then go off and research that for the benefit of the kingdom. That will carry over into exposition as well. There's potentially two options there. If you were to play Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD and create a family and play them in a specific region and they have their own settlement and things like that, or be a part of a settlement, whether or not you choose to play that family after exposition or not, they're going to continue to exist. You've introduced that surname into the region, and the things that you did are part of the history. If you choose to, for example, not play that family or in that region at exposition and launch, that's a choice you're going to make, but that was your family. So, for example, you used your bloodline ability to create a custom surname, and that was your custom surname in that region. You can't then create that same family with that same custom surname elsewhere, because that was that family. You've abandoned that family. That family is sad now that they have you no longer with them.
But when the game starts, you could make somebody from that family in that region and then decide
relocate.
to
Relocate,
move them. Like, not everybody in that family would necessarily come along with you. Like, they might not all transplant, but you could take you and maybe a spouse and some
children
kids
and be
or
like,
something
"Hey, let's
and be
go."
like, we're gonna go over to this other region now and make that part of the story that you tell in the game.
As we mentioned earlier, we had our recent design journal we just put out. The idea is to resume development journals, or design journals, and so we do plan to, as we continue going forward now, not only provide more design journals, but I'm also going to, after PAX, being more proactive about making sure that our game guide section of the website is up to date and that information is crystallized in a single location. Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD will go from the moment they're created all the way to the beginning of exposition. So even though we move into Alpha 1 and actually have an Alpha 1 playable version of the game, and then we move into Alpha 2 and we bring in like the building and settlement stuff and kind of land management, those will be things that will be a different experience and will be available to our Alpha backers, and then we'll kind of expand out as well. But we plan to keep Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD up throughout the duration. And like I said, in terms of actual duration, we'd like people to be able to do that for about 6 months, but we will cut those short as necessary in the interest of getting the game out in a timely fashion. So we won't prolong the release of the game solely to hit some kind of like minimum amount of time we want people to spend in Elyria MUD and Kingdoms of Elyria. We're going to spend very few resources on the user interface for Elyria MUD and Kingdoms of Elyria because that's not ultimately what we're trying to test. So every character might look the same, but we will have all of the tribes by then and the data associated with them and the effects and which biomes they can be in and things like that. As a mechanic, that's part of character creation, so it's one of those things that we'll have to test fairly early to make sure that it's balanced and feels good. And so my assumption at this point is that there will be inside of the world generation some of the settlements in Elyria MUD and Kingdoms of Elyria that have orphanages and will allow you to play as a ward during character creation at some of those locations. So I think it'll be there, if not at the very beginning, then shortly after that. This applies to anything that players can name. So family name, domain names,
Pets.
settlement name, pets. We really want this world to feel immersive, and we get that some people are going to claim that we're being too critical of names and that we're robbing you of your freedom to create names that you feel are connected to you. You're gonna have to deal with that. I don't have a better way to put that other than to say I think every one of the people on the team firmly believe that it rips you out of the immersion of the world to come upon a location or something like that that just doesn't feel like it makes sense because the person who named it was trying to be cute and funny and manipulate the name in such a way that it was obviously not period, or I say period, it doesn't make sense in the world that we've created.
I think common sense stuff is pretty good, you know, like cat, cow, like you should recognize that and know what it is. But like when you get unique and especially like signature creatures, you want to discover those for yourselves. Like it sucks to get killed, but it's also interesting at the same time when you're seeing something new and unique. And when it appears and like launches poison talons into you or something, you're like, whoa, that was kind of cool. I know not to do that.
There is a difference between pre-launch and post-launch. Pre-launch, we have a little bit more control about the uniqueness and the overall kind of integrity of people's names and locations and places to the point where we want them to feel relatively distinct. So we will make it so that when players are using their custom surnames, which they've created, it's unique to their family. So only your family will have your custom surname. If it's one of the names that are available in the game by default, like Farmer or Smith or something like that, then those are not unique. So it's possible you could end up with the name of somebody else in the world, much like our own world. In terms of location names, we will, as best as we can, make sure that we maintain the uniqueness of the location names as well. But you have to remember that once the game begins, the names of locations is outside of our control to a degree, because the names of locations are still kind of generally regarded as what people recognize that region as being called. So if cartographers come through and they take the name of a valley and they set it to something that happens to be the name of a valley elsewhere in the world, but it becomes well known for that in that location, then that will be the name of that valley in that location also. And there's not much that we can do and not much that I think we want to do to interrupt that process.
Yeah.
While we will have a publicly available version of Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD for everybody to play, we'll also have a version of it that's only available to the beta testers and the alpha testers and things like that. Because as we release new versions of it, we want to make sure that we're not putting out something that's entirely untested, primarily because of exploits and things that we have to do to roll back and stuff like that. So it will go out to the alpha testers and beta testers before it gets into the public. And also keep in mind that once we hit Alpha 1, and our Alpha 1 kind of experience comes along, which is our first kind of end-to-end, not quite feature complete, but end-to-end version of the online game, that's also going to come up with testable servers, and so people will have multiple locations to test. The things that happen inside of the Alpha 1, which should have all these same mechanics at some point, that stuff doesn't preserve. So we hope that people use Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD as first an opportunity to test and provide feedback on things, not necessarily to look for breaking changes, but then people will continue to, after we have the Alpha 1 available, use that to kind of help drive the history and stuff like that while using the Alpha 1, Alpha 2, and beta test versions of the game to actually look for bugs and help us break things. There are no adoptions, so if you chose to play as a ward, then you're a ward until you establish a family of your own. If you chose to join a family, then you're a member of that family. So while you could start as a ward and then join that person's house and become a servant, or quote unquote allegedly be adopted into that family as a servant or something like that, that's not going to change your surname anyways. You take on whatever surname you had before, and that's true whether or not you began as a ward or even if you began as part of another family. Just working in someone's household doesn't actually make you one of their bloodline. One of the things we really wanted to do is put the power back into the hands of the player for how big their domains were going to be at launch. And so rather than having fewer number of domains where there was a strong likelihood that all of them were going to be purchased between now and exposition, or more importantly between now and domain settlement selection in Kingdoms of Elyria, we increased the number. We did that for a couple of reasons, but one of the main reasons is so that people can select those domains while still having a buffer around them. So, for example, there are 24 counties per duchy. If, for example, 10 or 15 of those counties were to be purchased and claimed before Kingdoms of Elyria, then the remaining ones are going to be neutral territory owned by NPCs around the current player counties, or yeah. So the idea with that then is that during Kingdoms of Elyria, through the development of Casus Belli, whether or not through espionage or marriage or through other ways of getting a Casus Belli, which we are working on still, you could then choose to invade one of the neighboring areas. That wouldn't wholly allow you to conquer it. What we'll probably do is introduce some kind of point system where as you attack neighboring counties like that, it slowly allows you to accumulate more and more of their regions, moving the boundaries of their land inwards, to the point where if it's an NPC county, then you would actually be able to take over that county outright, or split it with another neighbor who's also attacking that county. So the borders and boundaries of the different domains will change throughout Kingdoms of Elyria. If you, however, end up in an area where everybody around you is player-owned, the mechanics are the same, except that now you'd be getting Casus Belli and invading neighboring players. Similarly, it wouldn't automatically allow you to conquer them and take over those. We're very strict about the idea that if you came into Kingdoms of Elyria with a domain like a county, that you exit with a county. It might be smaller in size because the surrounding counties have carved into it a little bit, but you'll always maintain at least the minimum size we set for a county, and you can't lose it. We haven't set an exact date on it yet. We do want people to be able to select and provide a name for their noble houses, and they'll use those during the Alpha Experiences, so they'll have that available in Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD. I'd like to have those coat of arms being available in Kingdoms of Elyria so that you could at least see them in your UI and stuff like that, but it doesn't have to be available right away, so we'll probably prioritize that against the work that we're trying to do. Then they don't participate. We had mentioned earlier that we want these to be optional experiences. They're opportunities for the individuals who want to play the game to participate in the history and the lore, to help build up their alliances, and to kind of become engrossed in the game, because really the game does start with settlement and domain selection. It doesn't begin with launch. The Dance of Dynasties, at the very least, begins as soon as settlement selection happens, and then definitely upon the start of Kingdoms of Elyria and Elyria MUD. But those who choose for whatever reason, or perhaps they can't participate, the absolute worst thing that would happen is that though other surrounding domains, whether or not that be a county or a kingdom or a duchy, were to actively participate and to view you as a target, and then were to continue to proactively try and engage in your settlement, in which case the NPCs that we have in your stead would do the very best they could to defend and play the game kind of in your absence, but there is a potential that they could carve out smaller pieces of your domain or settlement. From our perspective, what that really means is that's what your domain size was at launch. Thank you guys for joining us. Hopefully you got your questions answered. If you did not,
Go read the design journal.
the
read
chances
the
are good the
design
answer
journal.
was there. And if that's still not there, then of course definitely hit the forums. Make sure you post your questions there. That's all from us here at Soulbound Studios. Stay tuned next month for our next Q&A. We don't have the topic yet, but as soon as we know the topic of our next design journal is, we'll be sure and share that with you.
Yeah, I'll share that in the next update.